skeptical or worrisome or bleak or any combination of them. It's whatever. We're coming into a time of shortages, and with the potential of monkeypox becoming a thing, and the possibility of more lockdowns, restrictions, everything combined could be the end result, a collapse, or just a very, very bad broken supply chain. Not that we already don't have a broken supply chain, because we do, but times are uncertain, and with that, we need to make sure everything that we have lasts as long as it physically possibly can. Maybe that means you need to get a sewing machine, thread and needle, spare fabric, and learn how to sew to mend clothing. Maybe that means getting old tires for, you could attach the tread of an old tire onto, the bottom of your shoes for retreading your shoes if times get that bad. Maybe that means keeping old cans, like old food, canned food, cleaning it out. That has a secondary purpose. Let me get into that real quick. So let's say there is a collapse, right? And now, say it's an economical collapse, and now you're resorting to bartering and shit like that. Well, let's say you're good on plants. You have a bunch of plants, like you have some tomato plants, you have some pepper plants, you have some squash, stuff like that. Any kind of plant, and that you want to use that for bartering. You don't have any planters, but you have a lot of canned food. When you use your canned food, do not throw out the can. What you could do is you could wash it out really good, throw some soil in there. You can put one of the small seedlings or very small plants in that, and you could use that for easy bartering. Another thing, what you could do with like jars, for example, milk jars. Yes, it's still a thing. At least, some places it's still a thing. In California, they've got some milk in glass jars. Now, they want you to return the jar for reuse and stuff like that. But, that's just them. Anyways, you can, get a glass jar of, let's say it is a glass jar of milk. Drink the milk. Don't throw the jar out. You don't necessarily need to return it. You could use that jar for other purposes, like storing grease, like bacon grease. People used to store or keep bacon grease, or just grease in general. Now, you can use this grease to cook with. So, whenever you make bacon, store the grease in that jar, and then you can reuse that grease later on. Secondary purpose. Well, actually, I guess that's 3 different purposes. You can repurpose the grease out of the bacon grease, and you're repurposing the glass jar at the same time. Old tires, you could you can turn old tires into planters, like outside. I've heard mixed reviews on doing that, but that is something that you could do. old clothing to the point of no repair can be repurposed into like rags and stuff like that, cleaning rags. So don't just don't throw that old clothing out that, that's not repairable. You can turn that into rags. Or hell, maybe you can even turn it into like a cloth diaper. If you buy something and it comes in a cardboard box, instead of throwing the box out, take a box knife, cut it into strips, and you can use that for like kindling for a fire, or you can turn it into fire starters. I made a video, I think it was last winter, on making homemade fire starters that work really well. Even broken glass you could have that as a secondary, there could be a secondary use to even broken glass if you are crafty enough. Now, if it's a large enough piece of glass, and you're crafty enough, you can turn that into like a knife or a spearhead or something. Obviously it's not going to make the best use of it, but it's still, you can still turn that into a knife or a spearhead or maybe even an arrow tip if you know what you're doing. If you have like bushcrafting skills and you know how to make spears or knives, then you could definitely turn a large enough piece of broken glass into a useful object. There's just so many items out there that have a secondary use. I'm sure if you take some time to think about it, then you can find probably some of the most obscure items that have other uses than what they were originally intended for. Now, this video is also about making things last as long as they physically possibly can. Now, if you have a vehicle, then I'm sure you know that vehicle needs tires. And tires are going to be a constant wear and tear item on the vehicle. Whenever you drive that vehicle, you're wearing down the tires little by little. One thing that I do on my personal vehicles, I have, at home, there are 3 SUVs. One of them is, we just got it a little while ago. We haven't really done anything to it yet. But on 2 of them, one thing that we do to help make sure these vehicles have less wear and tear is we buy the heaviest weight rated tire that we can for them. Now, this does cost money. This obviously costs money. It costs more money than buying a regular tire. But in doing so, you're making the tires last a lot longer than they normally would. Now, they will have a slightly worse ride, but that's not even noticeable. Not for me or my wife. So we buy the heaviest weight rated tires that we possibly can for these vehicles, and they last a lot longer than a regular tire would. So that's one thing that you can do to help your vehicle last as long as possible. And tires are one of those things where you get what you pay for. So my recommendation on tires, get the heaviest weight rated tire that you can for your vehicle. It will help. Vehicles these days are, I'm not going to say that they're designed to fail, but there is this thing called planned obsolescence, which, stuff becomes obsolete in vehicles faster, forcing you to buy replacement parts. A lot of the parts are made out of plastics and stuff like that. Now, I've I've got two 90s, like mid-model 90s Ford SUVs. And back then, they were designed more rugged. They were designed, they were overbuilt, is what I was looking for. They were more overbuilt back then than they are right now, because they didn't really have the technology to figure out, how long something was going to last. So they made it to where it was more overbuilt and it would last longer rather than last not long enough. But now we have the technology to figure out how long something is going to last. And things are built out of plastic more often than not now. So, when you're buying car parts, if you can, if they have like a metal component over a plastic component, I would suggest getting the metal component over the plastic. That way that part is more overbuilt. It's going to last longer, more than likely. It's not going to have the possibility of melting over time, things like that. So if you have the ability to buy overbuilt parts for your vehicle over like plastic parts, like sensors and things like that, I would highly recommend buying those parts, especially theft risk, Los Angeles, secure your load. That's very interesting. That's never popped up. Anyways, buy those overbuilt parts if you can, because your vehicle will last longer with those parts. This next one's going to be something for the people who are not really hurting for cash. And that would be my recommendation for buying a 3D printer. Now, I would recommend buying a 3D printer. And yes, a lot of it's going to be plastic, plastic items, things like that. And it completely contradicts what I just said about buying more overbuilt products over the plastic stuff. But I'm going to say this because if you are able to get a 3D printer and get the materials for that printer, then you can get the specific, the specifications, the part sizes, diameters, whatever, the design. Let's say, you want to have spare door handles for your car, let's say. Well, then you could easily, if you get the dimensions, that's the word I was looking for, dimensions, for the door handle for your vehicle, you could go ahead and print out like 4 or 5 handles for that vehicle, like spare handles. And I say that because I've had plenty of vehicles that have had the inside door handle break, and it was an absolute pain in the ass to get the door to open. So, you could print out spare parts for your vehicle and spare parts for other objects, you name it, you could probably print it out. I mean, hell, they make 3D printed houses nowadays, which are cheaper and stronger than your traditional brick and mortar home. And, that's another great thing that I didn't actually think about that now I'm going to talk about it, is if you have the money and you're looking into buying a house or buying land even right now, if you have the money and you find a good piece of land and you're looking to move, hop on it, because everything is going up in price. So if you find a good piece of land for a decent price, I would recommend getting it, especially if it's got its own water source. Then definitely jump on that deal. And then what you could do is you could have a home 3D printed on that land. There's plenty of companies out there that you can do that with. And 3D printed homes are probably going to be the future. Now, let me tell you why. 3D printed homes are cheaper by a lot. And they are a lot stronger than your traditional home made out of wood. They can be very well insulated, and probably a lot less flammable, let's be honest. And they go up pretty quick as well. Like they can be built in pretty much no time. They're very effective, efficient, and that's something that I would recommend if you're looking at buying a house. Maybe look at buying land and then having a 3D printed home put on that plot of land. Because maybe that would be a cheaper option than buying a already pre-existing home on a plot of land. And if you're one of those people that is worried about, let's say, a nuclear war and radiation, then concrete or the material that they use in building 3D homes, you can make that to the specified thickness where radiation is not going to get through. So you could definitely have a home built to the thickness that you want. That's going to be really good at withstanding radiation. Now, obviously, it's going to be more expensive the thicker the home that you want, but you can build it to however thick that you want. Tell them, you want it so and so thick, and you can even have the interior walls be that thick. It's pretty much a custom built home for the cheap.